fall has officially arrived around here, which means we're busy preserving the last of our harvest and starting to put our gardens to bed for the winter and doing a little seed saving. So lots of plants in our garden have gone to seed already, and working on saving those seeds and putting them away for next year.
Hey guys, so today I'm going to be talking to you about seed saving and showing you how to save seeds from some really common and easy to save from plants from our garden. So if you're just kind of dipping your feet into seed saving, you're just beginning, haven't done a lot, I'm going to tell you kind of the basics of what you need to know and show you how to save seeds from some of the easiest plants to seed save from, show you how that's done. So first of all, before we get started, I just want to kind of go over like why even bother saving seeds. So there's a few reasons why you might want to save seeds from your annual fruits and vegetables in your garden. And the first reason, of course, is self-reliance, which is what all of us modern homesteaders are really after, right? We want to, eliminate the dependency on, the grocery store and on seed companies and on outside sources essentially to provide for us. And we want to be able to provide for ourselves and produce what we need on our homestead, big or small, right? So of course, saving your own seed means that you can produce your own seed and you can stop having to purchase it from elsewhere. And that also means that in case, there's a shortage of seeds or for some reason you can't get them from somewhere, that you'll have your own seeds saved at home and you can actually build up a bit of your own seed bank. So another reason why you may want to save seeds is so that you can produce healthy and robust plants that are adapted to your environment year after year. So if you're doing seed saving correctly, which is, you're saving seeds from your healthiest, most robust, most productive plants in your garden, you're taking those seeds from those plants and then you're replanting them the next year, and they're taking on those traits from that plant and they're reproducing another healthy plant and they're getting adapted to the environment that they're growing in. So healthy, kind of robust, productive plants in your garden, that's another reason why you may want to save your own seed. And another reason is so that you have seeds to pass on to future generations. So that's where the term heirloom seeds come from. They're seeds that have been passed down through generations, and that's kind of how it's traditionally been on the family farm, is that, you'll save seed year after year, and then when your children get old enough, then you pass that seed on to them and they start growing it and then pass that seed down and so on. So it's a really kind of unique legacy to pass down to your, generations in your family, and passing on that kind of gift of self-sufficiency to them. So that's kind of the why. I'm sure there's many other reasons why you may want to save seed, but that's definitely my top three. Now, the trickier part is, how do you save seeds? And that might seem really easy, especially with certain, fruits and vegetables, that the seeds are really easy to save from them. But there's a few things that you need to know about saving seeds before you just go on and save seeds from any old plant. So first off, you're going to want to save seeds from plants that are either open pollinated and or heirloom seeds or heirloom plants. So in short, open pollinated plants are plants that are pollinated naturally by the wind or by insects, or they're self-pollinating or whatnot. So they're not essentially bred by human beings, they're open pollinated, they're pollinated naturally in your garden. So those ones are going to be, viable to save seeds from. And same with heirloom plants. And heirlooms are all open pollinated, but like I said, heirlooms are specific seeds that have actually been saved and passed down through generations and have been kind of carefully selected and saved. So all heirloom plants and seeds are open pollinated seeds, but not necessarily all open pollinated seeds are heirloom seeds. So either way, regardless, if you've got seeds or plants that you're growing that are open pollinated and or heirloom plants, then you are able to save seeds from those plants. And there's a caveat to that, but I'll go over that in a minute. What you don't want to do is save seeds from hybrid plants. So hybrid plants are plants that have been deliberately crossbred by humans. So they're not able to breed together, naturally in the open, like open pollinated seeds can cross-pollinate with each other, but they do so naturally. Hybrid seeds are specifically seeds or plants that have been bred by humans. They're not GMOs. They're not created in a lab where they're actually crossed with other species and all sorts of weird things. They are just two plants that are bred together deliberately by humans so that they can kind of create this crossbreed with, the best qualities of both worlds. But the reason you don't want to save seeds from these hybrids at home is because when you plant one of these seeds the following year, what you get, if it does germinate and produce anything, is not actually going to be anything like the plant that you saved the seed from. It's actually going to revert back to one of those parent plants, and it's either going to be one of the parent plants that was used to create that new hybrid plant, or it's going to be kind of a mix of both parent plants, and you're going to get something weird. And sometimes that's okay, and it's edible and it's even palatable, but other times it's not. So stick to open pollinated and heirloom seeds. Now the next thing you need to know, so now you've narrowed it down, you're going to save from your open pollinated and heirloom seeds. However, you also need to know which plants are self-pollinating and which ones are cross-pollinating. And while it is possible to save seeds from both, if you're just getting started, then you really want to just stick to self-pollinating plants. So those are things like tomatoes, peas, beans, peppers, lettuce, things like that. So self-pollinating plants will stay true to the plant that the seeds will be true to the plant that you got them from. Cross-pollinating plants, however, because they need to be, cross-pollinate with each other, and usually that's done by insects carrying pollen from one plant to the next, they can kind of end up like hybrids, where you have this kind of weird hybrid plant that's crossed, naturally with each other. There's a couple plants that are crossed naturally with each other and have now produced something that is not like the plant that you saved the seed from, and is maybe more like one of the parents or both of the parents, and is not really awesome. You can, like I say, save seeds from those plants, but you need to be more advanced. You need to know about how to hand pollinate and keep the flowers closed while the insects are out, doing the pollinating and all these different things. So it's a lot more complicated. So for today, and for now, getting started, I would definitely say to stick to your self-pollinating plant varieties. And I'm going to show you how to save seeds from a few of those common self-pollinating plant varieties right now. So one of the most common ones is beans. So I've got a couple bean pods here that I let go on the vine. And one thing that's really important when saving seeds is you want to let the pod or the fruit or the vegetable, whatever, ripen on the vine or ripen out in your garden like as much as possible, like past ripe even, because you want those seeds to be fully formed and really mature. So if, for example, I pulled some beans off of the vine before they had fully ripened and then let them sit out to dry, those bean seeds are probably not going to be viable or not even going to germinate and produce anything, or if they do, maybe very weak and they'll die off before they actually give you a harvest, because the seeds haven't had time to fully mature before they were their life was cut short by you taking them out of the garden. So you want to leave whatever you're wanting to harvest for seed on the vine or out in the garden as long as possible before you harvest. And in the case of beans, you want to wait till the pods are completely dried on the vine and then harvest them off. But then from there, it's really one of the easiest seeds to harvest, because all you do is you pop open the bean pod. And if you want to come in close, I'll show you that. So pop open the bean pod, and then inside, are the bean seeds. So this one is actually my friend Melissa K. Norris over at melissaknorris.com and Pioneering Today podcast. She sent me these seeds, and these are her family's heirloom bean seed. They are Tar Heel green beans. So I've actually planted all her seeds, so I'm going to be saving these this year so I can replant them the next year. Now with bean seeds, you really want to make sure that they're nice and dry before you save them. If you harvest them and out of the pods and you put your fingernail into them and they leave a dent, then it's not dry enough yet, and you're going to want to leave them sit out for longer. These ones have been drying for a few weeks, actually, I think was when I brought these pods in. So they're nice and dry and they're ready to store. From there, I can just either put them in a mason jar, pardon me, or I store them in like a paper bag or something like that. So the next one I'm going to show you is peas, and I thought that I had some pea pods saved, but I didn't. I had already shelled them all, but very similar to beans. You leave the peas on the vine until they're fully dried out, then you harvest the dried pods, and then you crack them open, and you take out those little peas. So this works with shelling peas, of course, right? You shell them and you take the pea out, but these are actually And sorry, don't pay any attention to my awful nail polish. It needs to be redone. But these are sugar snap peas. So even though with the sugar snap peas, you're actually eating the pods, the immature pods, in order to save seed, you want to let those pods mature on the vine and dry out completely, and then harvest them, open them up, and then take those pea seeds out. I got a cat going wild in here. Okay, so take your pea seeds out. Same thing, right? Just do the fingernail test and make sure that that the peas, that you can't make an indent with your fingernail. If you can, let them dry out longer until they're completely hard, and then you can store them. These ones are actually from last year. We saved a whole bunch of peas. I planted some this year. But I still got a whole bunch more, which is why I don't have any pods right now, because I didn't bother saving any this year, because I still have lots of seeds from last year that will germinate next year. So those are our peas. Now, the next one I'm going to show you is tomatoes, and this one's a little bit more involved. And again, tomatoes are one of those that you want to double check to make sure you know if it is an open pollinated or heirloom variety or a hybrid variety, because there are a lot of open pollinated and heirloom tomato seeds, which is awesome, but there are a lot of hybrids as well. So just know what you're dealing with ahead of time. The paste tomatoes that we were using are heirloom varieties, so we've gone ahead and saved some seeds from them. But for example, to show you quickly, we did plant cherry tomatoes as well, and this is the seed packet for them. And if you want to just zoom in here, right here, it says F1 on the pack. And F1 is actually, it means it's a hybrid. So F1 stands for filial one, which essentially just means it's the first generation plant that has been bred from two parent plants, deliberately bred from two parent plants. So if it says F1 on the pack, it's a hybrid, and there's no point saving seed from it because it's not going to be the same plant that you're saving it from. So I didn't bother saving any of our cherry tomato seeds. I'll have to continue to purchase these ones. However, on this pack, for example, for our lettuce, our romaine lettuce, it says OP, which means it is open pollinated. And then here, on our pumpkins, right, it says OP as well, but of course you need to know the pumpkins cross-pollinate. So even though it's open pollinated, right, you might not want to save seeds from those because they will naturally cross-pollinate, become hybrids. And then this one, last pack I'll show you, this is our peppers, and they also say open pollinated, and they say heirloom on there. So they're, like I say, they're an open pollinated, but these are also an heirloom pepper that have been passed down for generations. They're an Italian heirloom. So these ones you could go ahead and save seed from. With our tomato seeds though, so as long as you're working with an open pollinated or heirloom, tomato, you can save seeds from them. And technically you could just lay the seeds out to dry, but a better way is to actually ferment them first. So that's what I've done with these seeds. I've just put them in some water, like that's it. Just put the tomato seeds in some non-chlorinated water and leave them on the counter. I put a coffee filter over top just to keep fruit flies and things out. Leave it on the counter for 3-4 days, about that. And then the healthy seeds will actually sink to the bottom, if you can see the bottom there. And typically any non-viable seeds will actually float to the top. We don't have any floaters in this batch, which is awesome. It means we've got some good seed at the bottom. But so first off, fermenting, putting it in water like this is a good way to weed out the viable seeds from the non-viable ones, because you can scoop off the ones on the top and then you want to keep the ones that have sunk to the bottom. The other reason why you want to ferment them first is it helps to remove that kind of gelatinous coating on tomato seeds that helps to protect them and can actually prevent them from germinating. Also, fermenting them and introducing good bacteria can ward off bad bacteria that can lead to like seed-borne diseases. So you're, keeping your seeds viable and healthy. And then the last reason you want to ferment them is because you're actually mimicking the natural fermentation process that they go through. So if you were to leave tomatoes on the vine and they essentially they ripen and then they over-ripen and then they rot and then the seeds drop to the ground and then they grow. They go through a natural fermentation process as that fruit is rotting on the vine. So you're mimicking that natural process. So I've had mine fermenting for probably 4 or 5 days already. So I'm going to go ahead and strain them. So if you want to follow me to the sink, I'll just show you how I do that. Pretty easy, right? Just strain them through a colander. And there's all that kind of gelatinous stuff that's usually kind of attached to those tomato seeds. And now I can just rinse them, and that stuff rinses right off. And then from there, then I can dry them out. So I've got some paper towel here that I use. And from there, oops, of course they're wet right now, so they're a little sticky, but I can just put them out on paper, kind of spread them out a little bit, and allow them to dry out completely before storing. So I usually leave these out for a few days, right? Just to make sure they're 100% dry. You don't want to dry seeds like in a dehydrator or something like that, or in the direct sunlight, because that can affect the viability of those seeds and their ability to germinate later if the temperatures are too high. So like, don't stick them in your dehydrator or anything, just leave them out at room temperature. And as soon as they're dry, then same thing, you can store them in in an envelope or a paper bag or a plastic bag, as long as they're like 100% dry, so there's no moisture in there or makes them jar or whatnot. So now I'm just going to take you quickly out to the garden, and we're going to take a look at a few of the plants that we've got out there, some of them that have gone to seed and what that looks like, and then talk about some of the plants that we actually have to wait, they're biennials, and that we'd have to wait another year for them to go to seed to collect the seeds from. So I'll show you that, so come on. Come on in. This monstrosity right here is actually a single radish that we planted in the spring and that we let go to seed over the summer. So gotta come on in to see kind of the the size of this thing. So this is all one radish plant. And obviously, you know, if you grow radishes, they're pretty small, right? You don't need much space to grow a whole bunch, but if you let them go to seed, we've discovered they're massive. And so this one radish plant, I mean, I can only guess at how many seed pods are on there, right? Like hundreds on one radish, and that each pod contains usually about 5 or 6 seeds. So by continuing to save this radish seed, I mean, not only can we, you know, never have to buy radish seeds again, we'll have radishes for life, but we have enough to give to family and friends, and I mean, to make sure that everybody in our community never has to buy radishes again if we continue to save this seed year after year. And I just because this is so crazy, I want you to take a look at the base of this thing. So radishes, of course, when you harvest them after their typical 21 days or so, they're pretty small. But this is what a radish root looks like if you let it just go to seed over the summer. The root is massive, the stalk is huge, never mind the weeds, right? But yeah, so we'll be harvesting these seed pods as soon as they dry out on the vine. Now, the other one I want to show you is right over here, and please don't mind the weeds. This is just the reality of the end of the season, and we've had kind of a week or so of rain, so I haven't been out here, and everything's been growing, so the weeds are crazy right now. But this is one of our lettuce plants that we've let go to seed, and if you'll remember, I showed you the seed packet for these, our romaine lettuce. This is a head of romaine that we let go to seed, and it is open pollinated and it is self-pollinating, so I could go ahead and save seeds from there. You'll see that if you let it go, it'll produce flowers like this, and then what will happen eventually is these flowers, kind of like dandelions, they'll kind of turn to like a white fluff almost, and then you pull that white fluffy bit out, and the seeds are on the end of there, and you can take the seeds off of the fluffy part of the flower and save the seeds and replant them next year to get more lettuce. So that's what we'll do from this plant. And then the last thing I just wanted to quickly go over is right here. You probably can't see because of this crazy radish, but we have some of our carrots. So these ones are actually an heirloom variety that we grew called Paris Market carrots, and they're a little round variety. So of course they're an heirloom and open pollinated, so we can go ahead and save seeds from these as well if we want. But carrots are actually a biennial crop, which means you harvest them typically in their first year to eat, but if you want to save seed from them, you need to actually leave them in the ground over winter, and then when they start growing again in the spring, by about late spring, early summer, they should produce a flower, a beautiful flower actually, that looks very similar to Queen Anne's lace, if you've ever seen that, because Queen Anne's lace is actually a wild carrot. But they produce a flower that will produce seeds that you can save. But I would need to leave these in the ground now. I planted them in the spring. I'd have to leave them in the ground over the winter, and then let them start growing again in the spring, and then I could save the seeds once they went to seed next year. So again, you kind of just need to know some of the basics, some of the science behind how seed saving works. Like I say, definitely stick to open pollinated and heirloom seeds, know which ones are self-pollinating and cross-pollinating. And then of course, you know, for certain plants like this, you want to know which ones are biennials. Beets are another one that are biennial, so you'd want to leave them in and then have them go to seed the following year if you want to save them. So yeah, that's all for today, but it's the perfect time of year if you have not saved any of your seeds yet. Of course, we're pulling things out of the garden, starting to, you know, prep our garden beds for the winter and put everything to bed. So while you're at it, if you've got plants that have gone to seed, right, make sure that if they're viable seeds from viable plants that you can save from, that you go ahead and save those seeds. Because again, you know, like our ultimate goal doing all this is to try to be more self-sufficient, less dependent on outside sources. So if you're producing your own food already, why not produce your own seeds too, right? And then again, they are, you know, they'll be better adapted and healthier growing in your environment, and they are a true legacy that you can pass on to future generations. And again, that's like passing on the gift of self-sufficiency to your children and their children and beyond. So if you like this video, make sure to hit like below and subscribe so that you never miss an update from the house and homestead. Bye for now.